Welcome to the Comic Sauce Podcast, where we talk comics and comics culture. I am Henry Liu, and today I'm joined by Porfirio Rangel. Porfirio, how goes?
It's going good, Henry. It is pouring down here in Orange County, but I'm all snuggled up, warm, so I'm happy to be here talking to you guys.
Yes, likewise. I am also joined by Christian Diadamo. Christian, how's it going?
Hey, it's going well. Also, we just got a nice little break from the rain, but yeah, perfect time to watch some superhero movies, read some superhero comic books, and talk about them.
Yes, indeed. Today is February 1st, 2024. And today we're going to talk about Echo, the most recent Marvel Studios Disney Plus show. We're going to talk all about it. We'll get into spoilery detail. But before we get into the spoilery detail, maybe we can talk just a little bit about expectations. Echo is not exactly a household name Marvel superhero. But we were introduced to her in the Hawkeye series. So, what were your expectations before you watched the Echo series? What you think, Porfirio?
Yeah, I think like you said, like Echo's not a household name, like just to give a little bit of background, Echo, she is Native American, she's deaf, but what she lacks in those senses, she makes up in her fighting skills. She's like one of the few like comic book characters that um can stand toe to toe with like Daredevil, and it just becomes a stalemate. She's a total badass in that sense, and just cool seeing some representation for those two communities in um like a big like mainstream franchise like the MCU. And I will admit, when they announced an Echo project, I had my concerns because I was like, what can they possibly bring, to the character? And apparently a lot, from this TV show. This TV show was fucking awesome. I loved it. Um, and it was not on my radar about like stuff I was looking forward to, but I think that made like watching it, like that experience, just such more satisfying because since I had like no expectations, it it was really cool to just be like surprised at how it was written and the acting and all that fun stuff.
We'll get there. Let's just stick with
I know.
expectations for now. But it does sound like you had
Okay.
some good expectations going in. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
cool. What about you, Christian?
Yeah, so I had no idea who Echo was before watching Hawkeye. That was my introduction to her. Um, and let's see, I liked I remember thinking Hawkeye was all right. There were things, and so I was actually kind of surprised when she was getting her own spinoff show. Because I really didn't know anything about this character. Um, I will say what did get me like what really piqued my interest was the trailer. I thought the trailer was so cool. Trailer was really brutal. They said they were given this like TVMA rating. Kingpin's gonna be in it, and so that really piqued my interest. I was like, whoa, okay, all right. I like brutality in my comic books. I like hard-hitting action. Let's see where they go from this. I think they did play up some of that Daredevil Netflix vibe with it with the trailer, which did really love Netflix Daredevil. So that got me excited. It seemed like a bit of a return to that that older era of the MCU. which we now know is canon, fully canon.
That's
Mhm.
right. Yes.
What about
Uh,
you, Henry?
yeah, I definitely agree with pretty much everything both of you guys mentioned. Wasn't that familiar with the character previously. Thought she was cool in Hawkeye, but yeah, definitely surprised when I heard they were gonna have a whole show about Echo. And to be honest, was like, why?
Mhm.
But yeah, similar to Christian, when that trailer dropped and the word was getting out that this was gonna be like rated R level violence, I was like, oh shit, I definitely want to see this show. You know, I thought, especially after Moon Knight, I thought like the age of rated R Marvel stuff, other than Deadpool, was like gone, right? Like when Marvel Netflix was basically like erased from the face of the earth, I was like, I guess we're not getting that stuff anymore. But then along comes Echo. I was like, oh shit, all right, it's you know, we might be onto something here. So that is what interested me. I was like, okay, this looks gritty, it looks edgy, it looks violent, and I'm on board. So yeah, on that level, I was looking forward to checking this out. Definitely.
You, I really want to say something also before we get right into it. I feel
Yeah,
like even Disney didn't have that much confidence with this project, Like traditionally, if you look at like the Marvel Disney Plus shows, like they're released on like a weekly basis. But this
that's
one, like
right.
all 5 episodes were released in one day, and they even like if you guys can remember, like the opening scenes, it's not even the Marvel like traditional studios opening credits.
Yeah.
It's a whole nother banner. It's called Marvel Spotlight, I believe.
Spotlight. Yeah, that's right.
Uh-huh. And I don't know what that's supposed to mean, to be honest. But I just feel like Marvel and Disney just themselves did not have a lot of faith in this project. I think they just did it because they wanted to like, I don't know, like make a project to for like representation for like the Native American and disability superhero fandom, or I feel like that could have been it, but like all of us, like we were just like, who cares? Like why? So I don't know. It's just those details I kind of noticed.
And that is interesting about the Marvel Spotlight thing. Like you put it in good context. Like in one way, maybe they did that because if the show was poorly received, then they could have been like, oh well, it's not like the real Marvel, it's this different thing. It's Marvel Spotlight. So it's not our fault, maybe kind of a cop
Yeah,
out. So like an
yeah.
excuse. Maybe. I don't know. I mean I kind of read it as like it's the Black Label or like the Marvel Knights of Disney
Mm.
Plus. It's like, oh, this is just
Yeah.
just so you know, it's like it's an all black background and it's kind of letting people know this is okay, this is a little different. Maybe kids should not watch this. And yeah, I think that's kind of the official thing. But what you're mentioning, there might be something to that too, about like them sort of having an excuse.
Yeah, I never thought about it like that. The Marvel Spotlight. At first, I thought it was like they were going to be launching like a new brand or something, you know? Like
Yeah.
you were saying, like the Marvel Knights, the Black Label,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
haven't said much on it as of now
hmm
on what
Yeah.
Marvel Spotlight is.
I mean,
Uh,
maybe this was a bit of a test. Like if it didn't really pan out, then maybe they wouldn't continue it, but we'll see.
Yeah, because this is also their first project they've like released on two streaming services because they also
Yeah.
released on
Hmm.
Hulu
Yeah.
Yeah.
as well as Disney Plus.
Yeah. The whole thing felt kind of experimental, so we'll see. We shall see.
It wasn't this also like the first Marvel Disney Plus content where you had to like you could do like the it went under like the parent like viewing restriction thing.
Right, yeah. Yeah, well, I think the Marvel Netflix content that is on Disney Plus, they have that in that category also, I believe.
Well, yeah, I know the Marvel Netflix
But
does
like you
like
mean like
Punisher
new
and
content,
Daredevil.
you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think you're right. I think you're right. Okay, at this point, let's give the spoiler alert. We're gonna go deep into Echo. You've been warned. Spoilers are fair game. So the show itself. Let's get into it. The good, the bad, the ugly. Random thoughts. Let's do it all. Let's start with the good. What did we like about this show? I know, Porfirio, you mentioned you like the show a lot. Maybe we can start with you.
I mean, right off the bat, like the actress, uh, I I can't remember her name off the top of my head. Do you
Yeah.
can
Oh,
what's her name?
Alakwa Cox, I think is I may have butchered how you pronounce it, but it's Alakwa
Yeah, I
Cox.
think that's how you pronounce it.
All right.
But like off the yeah, like she was born to play Echo, and like she just did a marvelous job. I I think Henry, you told me that this is the only thing she's ever done in acting, just play Echo her entire
Yeah.
career, and like she's just really she's a badass, um and she's not like an actress who isn't Native American or deaf, um like she's not playing that, she is that, so
Yeah.
she's like essentially playing something that's herself but with like in a superhero form. She comes from both those communities, and so it's just cool to see that representation like on screen and for her to get that like opportunity, and she killed it. Like she Echo is just a badass who you just don't want to mess with. And the way she portrayed it, I was convinced. I was like, I'm not fucking with her at all. And I love just the performances that she gave and that awesome scene between her and Daredevil in like one of the first like scenes of the first episode was cool, but yeah, right off the bat, I just gotta give praise to her.
Yeah, I agree. She's really great in this show. And yeah, yeah, like you were saying, Porfirio, she was born to play Echo. I mean, she is Echo. She really is. She's like the real life version of this character, and she's amazing. She's so great. It's very inspirational. Um, and just like yeah, objectively is good. She puts in a good acting performance. She has great physicality in the show. Um, so yeah, 100% agree on the performance.
Yeah. I definitely agree too. Like I think one thing I want to add that it must have been really hard for the production, but I think really, really makes the show is the use of sign language and having a deaf main character. Like there's
Hmm.
not really
Mm.
many movies. I don't know if I could think of one off the top of my head with a deaf main character. Uh,
Yeah.
and like,
Mhm.
'cause that's really hard. Like how much not everyone knows ASL, and so I imagine that's like, one is that you have to teach the actors that, and in like a lot of different stories, you can't imagine that everybody is able to sign and communicate through sign language, like especially effectively. Like actors really need to, speak their roles, and you can't do that. So I imagine that's like a pretty major hurdle for the show. And I thought the show pulled that off really, really well. I think the way that they handled sign language and like conveying emotion through sign language and the movement of the hands was pretty
Hmm.
well done. Like, and I think you could really she could really convey how she's being by like sometimes how fast she's signing, like the kind of like the way that she moves her arms and hands with it. I thought was pretty well done. And I thought like I guess on kind of a similar beat to the topic, I thought it was a cool um part of the part of it was that like the only person that didn't really sign at all was the Kingpin, the
Hmm.
guy who's like, I'm your father, you know,
Yeah.
her
Yeah.
self-proclaimed father, who instead gives her an implant so he doesn't have to do anything or just hires an interpreter to sign for him
Hmm.
because he can't take the time to learn it, but everybody else around her takes the time, you know. So I thought that was pretty cool, and that like yeah. Alakwa Cox, you know, very extremely well cast as Echo.
Yeah.
Yeah, like going off piggyback off all of what you said, Christian. I think like yeah, it's I remember seeing like some videos of like behind the scenes, and some of the directors and crew members like took the time to take like ASL classes to be able to communicate with her and give her like direction and like notes about how she was doing certain things, you know. And um I mentioned the fight scene with Daredevil, and a good friend of mine told me that like there were some of those stunts she did on her own, which is totally badass, but they also had to be like very careful with the fight choreography that she wouldn't like hurt her hands, because that was like her main um way to communicate, so they couldn't like afford to make sure that she damaged them too badly. And
Yeah.
I thought that was just cool, like I guess like on a human level, like that, like what you said, Christian, that like the cast and characters were willing to go out of the way to take ASL classes and be able to communicate with her.
Yeah, I totally agree with you guys. The use of sign language is so great in this show. First of all, like you're saying, Porfirio, it's just cool. It's cool to see this, see something you really haven't seen done like this before. Like, it's not just Echo who is using sign language. It's like basically all her family communicates with her with sign language. So like all these actors, they had to learn how to do it, they had to use it, etc. Um, that was cool. And then you're really immersed into her world, right? Because you get a lot of like point of view stuff through Echo. Like a lot of the show, the audio cuts out, right? So you're kind of seeing the world through her and you're not hearing anything, right? And again, super cool. I mean, you just don't see this in other stuff. And then I love what you brought up, Christian, how the Kingpin doesn't know sign language, and it because the sign language becomes like this great like character moment, yeah? Like the fact that her real family has gone out of their way to learn the language and they communicate with her throughout the series. And then there's the Kingpin who is like, he's claiming like he's family, like he raised her in New York City and everything. And that's kind of the crux of the show, right? It's sort of like she's torn between two worlds. And it's really telling that this guy who's claiming to be her uncle, this big father figure, never bothered to learn her language, right? So it's not just a cool thing. It is a cool thing, but it's not just a cool thing. It becomes like part of the story, part of the character development of the show, and it's just like it's so cool. I love uh, all the aspects of the use of sign language here. What else? I know there's other good stuff in the show. Porfirio brought up the Daredevil cameo. Maybe we can talk
Yeah.
about that a little bit. Yeah. Episode 1, we did get a Daredevil cameo, and it's in basically the first action scene of the show. And I guess it's actually a flashback, right? Echo is like flashing back to her first assignment for the Kingpin, right? And it turns out to be a doozy of an assignment because she kind of freezes up, right? Right in the middle. But then, like, the first time she kills someone, then it kind of puts her on this trajectory where she just goes off and like shows her stuff and ends up fighting Daredevil, right? So what do you guys think of this scene? I prefer you started to talk about it earlier, but what are your thoughts here?
I mean, yeah, I thought that was a cool scene. It's cool, like you said, like this is her first assignment, and she was able to stand like toe to toe against Daredevil. Like they just went back and forth against each other. Here he is with like his like batons, and she's just using like her hands to like block his attacks and everything. Um, so like even Kingpin like later on says like, my men were taken out by him, but here you are like barely breaking a sweat and uh um like being like the opposing force to Daredevil. And so I just can only imagine how like years later, like where she is now in the series after so many years of like experience and all that stuff, like how a rematch would look like. I love Daredevil, but I'm just like, ooh, I would really love to see a rematch between the two and see what would happen.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And I know Echo has origins in Daredevil comics, so it kind of makes sense that they would face off here. But how cool was it that you get two disabled superheroes fighting each other, right? So kind of a win on the representation front here. You get a a deaf superhero with a prosthetic leg taking on a blind superhero. Just kind of a cool moment there. We should also mention that this scene starts out with and continues on with some extreme violence. Yeah. So that was pretty jarring. I think the scene starts with a guy getting like shot in the head or something. And I was like, whoa, this does not feel like a Disney Plus show. All right. So pretty early on, episode 1, fairly early on in the season, they give it to us, and a lot of these expectations you were talking about, like I was like, damn, let's go. Because I wasn't sure, like, okay, it's still Disney Plus. We've seen, the bloody shield and Falcon and Winter Soldier and like this, and the Marvel Netflix stuff is there, but like how violent is Echo going to be? And as it turns out, pretty damn violent. You know, it's definitely rated R violence. Probably not as violent as or definitely not as violent as the most violent stuff from the Marvel Netflix shows. But it's up there. It's definitely TVMA rated R level stuff. So that was cool. I enjoyed that. Christian, do you have some?
Yeah. It did really, really call back to those like hallway fight scenes from Daredevil.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, like the way it's like all one take, the way it kind of whips around this big
Hmm.
action scene. Like I did think it was really, really cool. That was probably like I think like one of the big crowning scenes
Yeah.
of the series is that big fight scene. Like
Yeah. Yeah. There was some
uh
cool like John Wick-esque music during that scene
yeah.
also.
Yeah, the music, the way the camera whips around in one take. And of course, like you see this like kind of the violence break out and then Daredevil shows up
Yeah.
like halfway
Yeah.
through. So, your excitement's level high is really high, and then when he shows up, it kind of goes through the roof, like, oh my God,
Yeah.
there he
Yeah.
is. Get this really cool fight scene, and it's like a good, like long fight scene,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
glad that they gave Daredevil like, his scene, like, and you get to see the more classic red suit, which is cool.
Yeah.
I think it was She-Hulk. They like hinted at the scene, but he had a little bit to do, but it feels like he has much more of a scene here, and I'm not as big a fan of the ketchup and mustard.
Yeah.
I was a big fan of how they portrayed Daredevil and She-Hulk at all. So,
Oh, I remember. Yeah.
this,
Yeah,
I remember you mentioned that.
so this was a big like, yes, this is the
yeah,
real Daredevil.
like a return to form.
Yeah. This
Yeah.
is the Daredevil we know and love
Hmm.
from
Yeah.
Netflix. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. The way it kind of ends with Kingpin talking, even though what was it like she loses, Kingpin's still like, "Well, you did really, really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You held up against Daredevil." So it's almost like he was kind of expecting all of that to happen in a very Kingpin way.
Yeah.
Yeah, episode one, I thought like it's probably I think of the five episodes, it's probably my favorite of it. I thought the beginning just it was just really cool.
Hmm.
Mm,
Started with a bang.
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
Uh,
since we're on top,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say since we're on, like on the topic of Kingpin, I thought he did a good job also in this show, of really good redemption also from Hawkeye.
Mhm.
Like I feel like this show was really went back to the Kingpin we know and understand from the Daredevil Netflix show, where it's just dark and he, you don't want to fuck with this guy. Like this is the type of guy who's I think I've seen this quote being thrown around a lot of times in online on social media with fans, and I agree. Like I feel like Kingpin is like the street level Thanos.
Yeah.
And this show really helps like put into image that Kingpin is not someone you want to fuck with. And here comes Echo, and she's pushing all the buttons, but um, like Kingpin was just really the character was just really a lot better here than in Hawkeye.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no Hawaiian shirt this time. This
Yeah.
time he's got the cool white suit.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of the Kingpin's look, I think this show is where Vincent D'Onofrio looked most like the the comics Kingpin because they kind of had him looking like the comic Kingpin and Hawkeye, but yeah, he had that Hawaiian shirt. And in the Netflix shows, he never really looked like the comics Kingpin that much. But in this show, in Echo, he was wearing like that huge blazer and the huge suits and everything. Really looked like he was straight out of the comics. Kind of cool.
Yeah, like Vince D'Onofrio is just so good as this character too. Every scene he's in, he has this like he's scary, but like the way he talks is always like kind of smooth, you know, little
Hmm.
little bit soft spoken at times. Yeah, kind of similar in a way, similar to Thanos, how it like they're both like these really, really big guys, but the way they speak is a bit more soft spoken, until
Mhm.
until of course, the big action scene comes and they do rage. And Kingpin does, he really takes it on the, what was it, the ice cream guy in the
Yeah,
flashback, ice cream hot
yeah,
dog. I forget I guess it doesn't matter what he was selling.
The
Kingpin
food
just,
vendor.
yeah, Kingpin just like brutally punches to death.
yeah.
I thought was another great scene.
Hmm.
Hey, so one thing I wanted to bring up, we've talked some about the representation in the show, but yeah, I was just thinking, man, like how did this show even get made? I mean, it features a disabled Native American superhero in an ultra violent show on Disney Plus. I mean, you talk about like the least likely of shows you would come across, right? So I was just kind of racking my brain thinking, man, how it was kind of against all odds that this show even got made. Like I think we had similar discussions about Blue Beetle when we were talking about that movie. But it definitely is like a project that was like against all odds. And the fact that it even exists is like a big deal, right? It's a big win. So I thought about that all throughout the season, thinking, man, I felt like fortunate that I got to see something like this because it really is like I don't know, like it's just it's something that like a mainstream audience wasn't exactly like clamoring for,
Hmm.
right? So I think it's
Hmm.
just cool that the fact that it exists, that's awesome. We'll get into it some more, but I think there were some flaws in the show, but ultimately, the fact that it's here, that I'm able to watch it and enjoy it, then that's awesome.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't know if you guys know this, but fun fact, like, um, Henry, what did you say that was the tribe that she's a part of in the character?
Oh, the
Echo
Choctaw.
Choctaw, like the language they speak. I guess there's a option on Disney Plus where you can watch it in that language.
Oh, that's cool. Love that.
So
Amazing.
yeah, like you bring up so many good points, Henry. Like how is this project made? And it's cool. It's really, really awesome that we get to see this kind of representation and these kind of projects that we could watch them. I don't know, like it on a comic book level or just like in general, but it's awesome that like content like this exists for like a mainstream audience that you just don't see like anywhere in Hollywood, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Right on.
Yeah, it definitely is good. Like, it's good that like Marvel's really like trying new things,
Mhm.
It's good to see them really branching out.
Yeah.
Representation matters, and like we don't really get a lot of Native American like representation, especially not like a superhero.
Yeah.
And so it's great that like, they really went for it on this, especially because they put a lot of work into the the Choctaw Nation. There's a lot of characters. You kind of get like her whole family story. Um, you get to see like her grandpa and grandma, and they have like a little arc, and like her cousins. It was like biscuits, and it also like who was the character? Henry, yeah,
Mhm.
Henry Black Crow Lopez. Um,
Yes.
it was also the kind of guy who was like working for Kingpin. That I forget his relation to Echo. If he
Yeah, I forgot
specific,
too.
yeah. But in a way, they were almost like a bit like the partners. Like he was kind of the one, like he was also working for Kingpin, and he kind of see, but also kind of helping her out while also trying to keep his head down because he's scared of the Kingpin. Um, and of course, Biscuits. He
Yes.
uses a little time to shine. I think it was like episode 2, Biscuits, and what was this? It was like Billy Jack or something.
Oh, with his truck.
Yeah,
He
that's
was
right.
helping out Echo. He helped out at the end too with the monster truck.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah. All right. So we can definitely continue on with highlights, but maybe we can shift gears a bit now. Talk about some of the stuff we didn't like so much. I know before we start recording, Christian, you had some stuff you want to bring up. Maybe you can kick it off here.
Okay, I'll kick it off. Well, I did like the characters representation, especially our main character of Echo of Maya Lopez. Um, and like kind of a lot of like the pieces. I think uh I I'll say that the story kind of lost me as the show kind of went on. I was really into it by or at episode 1. I was like, oh man, this is really cool. I'm really curious to see where this goes. This is like you got some really badass action. Got the Kingpin about this like cool New York assassin in New York. Um and of course she shoots Kingpin and has to, kind of lay low back in Oklahoma. But still is a bit torn between the world of the Kingpin and who she was before. But I'll admit, as it kind of went on, it did lose me. There was a lot less action. We don't get an action scene quite like that first one.
Mm-hmm.
The one I think it was like the bowling alley was okay, but they introduced a villain that I thought was kind of forgettable. About halfway in, one of like the Kingpin's henchmen that's looking
Mm-hmm.
for her,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of unfortunately culminates in um, a final act that I thought was really bad. I really didn't like that last episode. In true Marvel fashion, unfortunately, it's way too
Yeah.
rushed.
Yeah.
It's way too rushed. They want to fight. They kind of do. They want a big finale that they don't fully think through. And so even though it starts great, by the time you end, you're kind of scratching your head,
Yeah.
which, yeah, which really is too bad for something, that they just took a big swing on.
Yeah. Good points. I'm in agreement on a lot of that. Yeah. The show started with a bang. Episode 1 was very exciting. 2, 3, 4, things slowed down. But, in my mind, it was somewhat forgivable because, they were going for more character development type stuff than just like full on action, which, I appreciated. I was, somewhat interested in Echo's family, like the people of Tamaha, Oklahoma. Um, but in the back of my mind was, okay, we started off big. Let's end with a bang too, right? And it was kind of set up that way. But I agree, man. Like the ending of the show was a big dud. And sadly, we just see this so often with these Marvel Disney Plus shows. And um yeah, whether it was rushed, it felt rushed, or just like movie people not knowing how to do TV. Maybe there's some of that going on. I don't know. Like yeah, like okay, so let's we've been talking about it. So let's just get into the final episode. Um so one big aspect is they were setting it up for it to be this big action climax, right? You got Kingpin's henchmen gearing up. They got machine guns ready to tear up the powwow and take out Echo and her family. And the Kingpin himself is there. and Echo is there she's getting ready, right? She's got uh you know she's seemingly ready to go to battle too, right? But then it kind of subverts all that, right? Because instead of a big action climax, there's some action, but they kind of have this message of like, instead of violence and aggression, um the conflict is resolved through, I don't know, loving kindness. So I mean, I understand what they're going for, because it's like she's using what she got from her mom rather than what she got from the kingpin, right? So that was a struggle of the show, right? She's being torn between two worlds, and ultimately she rejects the kingpin and truly becomes part of her family and her ancestry, right? But I mean, just action wise, it was a big letdown, right? Like, you didn't get that like awesome finale you were hoping for, and it was messy too, because there were like these weird superpowers involved that kind of didn't make any sense. They were sort of teased throughout the season, where Echo would have these visions of her ancestors, and these hints that, okay, she herself has these powers that really didn't manifest until the end. But then when like she gets the powers, it's completely not clear like what the powers are, and it was a big surprise that like she can like pass along the powers to her grandma and to her cousin, and it's still not clear like what it is. So it's very confusing, and I was left just kind of flabbergasted. I'm like, what is happening? And I don't know. I wasn't feeling it. So I don't know. Any other thoughts on episode 5 here?
Yeah, I think I guess like I to both of you guys' points, I agree to a certain extent. Like I feel like it was kind of like a big letdown just because, like the whole series, like we've talked about how badass Echo is and everything. So I thought it would lead to like this like cool like fight scene between like Kingpin and Echo, or like a big bad villain or something like that. Um and then like you said, Henry, it was like hinted throughout the series about like Echo having these like visions with her ancestors through like different generations about like when these like powers were needed, when the ancestors needed them the most. And I feel like I have a couple theories. I don't really know what they are, but um I guess like one theory that I've read that's a popular theory online is that Echo's a mutant, and that they're slowly like introducing the mutants into the MCU, and Echo is one of them. Um, in the comics, she's never been associated with being a mutant, but neither was Miss Marvel, and apparently she's a mutant also. So who knows? But that's a popular theory. And then another theory that's being thrown around is that like there's a Echo series where she is the host of the Phoenix, and in that series like she like goes back in time through like her ancestors and kind of gains like a bit of knowledge here and there, and kind of is able to control the Phoenix and destroy her enemy. So maybe she's like, I don't know, like the MCU Marvel Studios is giving her the powers of the Phoenix instead of the traditional host Jean Grey that we know, and Echo kind of just sharing that power with her family to destroy or defeat Kingpin. But then the whole like Kingpin Echo's tapping into like Kingpin's like inner demons and cleansing himself. I thought that was kind of like, okay, Echo, like this kind of defeats the purpose of the character of like being violent and uh resorting to like killing. Maybe we're just an audience who wants that, but here she is like being like, oh, um, you're gonna be peaceful now. Like you don't have to fight with your inner demons anymore. You know, like let go of all that guilt that you've been carrying and
Mhm.
stuff. And now we're BFFs. You're not gonna hunt me anymore. I don't have to look behind my back if you're gonna like hunt me down or whatever, you know? And
Yeah.
it just felt really ridiculous. And but I think we'll see more of her and those
Mhm.
powers being explained and maybe to prove to have a bigger um like story, you know, in the
Mhm.
MCU. But that only time will tell, you know.
Yeah, we'll see what happens moving forward. But the more I think about it, I have a lot of problems with the superpowers. Like number one, I just kind of I liked the fact that Echo didn't have superpowers, right?
That she was like the street level kind of
Yeah, a
vigilante.
street level hero, and like she's like, I was gonna say she's a normal person, but she's not even a normal person. She's like she has um she's been given like she's been dealt a bad hand in life, right? She has these disabilities, she's deaf, she has a prosthetic leg, and despite that, she's able to excel, right? She becomes this great fighter, this great warrior, right? So it's like to me, that's like that's really inspiring that someone like that can become can achieve greatness, right? But then like the superpowers things, like okay, we she doesn't need to have like actual superpowers because she, you know, because of all the things I just mentioned, right? So that it just doesn't sit that well with me. It seems like really unnecessary. And like in my mind, they could have still used like all that stuff we saw about the Choctaw ancestors, but not make it like she explicitly got superpowers through them, right? Um,
Hmm.
Through her family and her ancestral lineage, she can get inspiration. So in that final episode, maybe you get like a flashback montage of you see all these images of the ancestors and her family inspiring her, and that enables her to overcome evil, right? I think that would have worked a lot better than just like explicit superpowers that were like really not explained well at all, and I'm just left scratching my head, right? So that was a bit of a miss on my end.
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead, Christian.
No, I was just gonna say I agree. I think like it feels more like an afterthought,
Yeah,
um, rather than like the base of the show. And you know, I thought she kicked a lot of ass, you know, like without any superpowers.
yeah,
And I kind of just wanted to see more of that, you know?
Hmm.
yeah,
Like you don't need superpowers in a superhero show. Uh,
yeah.
you know, coming from someone whose favorite character is Batman, like, you don't need
There
superpowers
you go.
to have a cool
Yeah,
superhero.
yeah.
You can just have good action.
hmm Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about Alakwa Cox. I mean, she is a real life superhero. She's this young Native American woman who is deaf, for real deaf. She for real has a prosthetic leg. Um, and for real, she kicks ass. Like she's like she's the living embodiment of Echo, and she is a superhero, and like that's all you need. Like we don't need to add like mutant powers and shit, right? So uh, stick with that, and I'm good. But yeah, like, I feel like yeah, at the end they were just like, oh, let's give her these superpowers and like throw in all this extra stuff, and yeah, it was a bit disappointing. All right, so random thoughts. Any thoughts coming up? Good or bad or both? Whatever. Thoughts on Echo?
Hmm. Yeah, go for
Let's
it, Porfirio.
I was gonna say, let's talk about that end credit scene.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Uh, Henry, do you want to tell us what it was?
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, like we've been saying, this show is so different. It felt like an experiment in ways. It was dropped Netflix style, like all 5 episodes were dropped all at once. They streamed it on Disney Plus, but they also streamed it on Hulu. It was under this new label, Marvel Spotlight. I was kind of curious if there was going to be a mid-credit scene or a post-credit scene. As it turned out, there was a mid-credit scene featuring the Kingpin. So it's Kingpin in his private jet, and he's like flying back to New York, right? And he's kind of like pondering his next move. And the news is on TV, and the news segment is about who's going to run for the mayor of New York City, right? And you can tell that the implication is that the Kingpin is going to run for mayor. And it seems like the scene is a teaser for the new Daredevil series, right? So there you have it. What do you think? What are your thoughts on this, Porfirio?
Well, yeah, before I get into my thoughts, wasn't correct can you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Daredevil season 3 already have like that storyline of Fisk running for mayor?
Ooh, I don't
Oh, I
remember.
forget. It's been so long.
Like
Hmm.
I feel like that was the main storyline of like him running for mayor and then Daredevil like trying to um expose him. I don't remember. Um yeah, sorry, I don't remember. But anyways, in this content, in this content, I believe that they're going with the storyline from the Daredevil Back in Black series where vigilantism, like heroes like Daredevil, Elektra, Echo, She-Hulk, Miss Marvel, like they're kind of seen as a threat, which is very similar to like the Sokovia Accords with the Avengers. And so there's like this like public fear and public shame towards those kinds of folks. And in the series, Kingpin runs his campaign on that. He really preys on it and capitalizes on it. And he runs for mayor, saying that like when he becomes mayor, he's gonna make vigilantes like number one outlaws. He's gonna outban them. And Daredevil tries to stop him, and he fails. The mayor, Fisk becomes mayor, and the storyline continues into like the Devil Reign storyline. I think that's what it's called. And so you have all these street level characters like Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, She-Hulk, Spider-Man, um, who all are like trying to defeat um, the Kingpin, even though he has like the public and government support on his side. So I think it's gonna be interesting how that's gonna all play out in Daredevil. It really feels like this, like, I don't know if it's so soon or it's gonna be like a throwback to like previous like Disney Plus shows. Cause I mean, like, She-Hulk, she's essentially like an attorney, and Miss
Hmm.
Marvel, she also like caused some damage in that town, you know. Um, but I feel like it's gonna definitely be a little bit of like an Avengers um kind of team up in Daredevil. I don't know if it's gonna come in the form of like the Defenders or not, but I feel like in Daredevil we're gonna see more than just Daredevil in the terms of like superheroes who are gonna fight Kingpin in this Mayor campaign. But we'll see. I'm excited though, very much excited to see the two share the screen again.
Yeah, that's an interesting take because I think no question that that scene is a teaser for the new upcoming Daredevil series, but um, I don't think it explicitly hints at um, other street level Marvel heroes taking on Kingpin. But you're saying it definitely could lead to that, right? Like a
Yeah.
a Marvel superhero team up in New York City to take on the Kingpin, and that certainly has some promise for sure. Could be exciting, but yeah, it's kind of too early to say. There is the interesting nugget of news that we alluded to earlier that the Marvel Netflix shows are now considered MCU canon. So if they did want to do a big team up with Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Power Man, Iron Fist, Punisher, whatever, um, they could do it and have it be in the MCU, right? Now that they've explicitly declared that, right? I'm really curious to get your guys' take on that piece of information. Like, why are they saying that now? I remember throughout the years, all of us were wondering. We were watching these shows, we were enjoying Daredevil, watching The Punisher, etc. Um, and they would make references to the movies, right? These Netflix shows would make references to the MCU movies, but it never went the other way, right? The MCU movies never made reference to those shows. And Marvel Studios was very tight-lipped about it. They would not say one way or the other. They did not say that Daredevil was MCU canon, right? But now they're saying it is. So why now? Yeah, what are you guys' thoughts? Christian, any thoughts on that
Yeah, like
information?
yeah, I guess it wasn't really till like No Way Home where they really paid any mind to it, you know.
Right.
I think No Way Home, and I guess Hawkeye also was right around the same time. I forget which one technically. I think Hawkeye may have technically come first, but um, like as far as now, and I guess now that they're bringing it to Disney Plus, excuse me, they really want to, I guess, really like kind of bring back. I also think like a lot of those that era is pretty beloved. The shows
Yeah,
gen
yeah.
like do have their following, especially Daredevil. And so,
Mm-hmm.
because they reference the movie, it doesn't really like they don't need to make any major retcons for any of those shows. They've kind of existed largely in their own bubble that they can be like, well, yeah, sure, they were canon now. Now that they're a little more sure of they have the characters, they're allowed to use the characters in Disney Plus because I think it was like there was after the Netflix show, the deal expired and they couldn't use them for 2 years, so they're in this like weird limbo, so to speak, where we weren't really sure what was going to happen to them. I think, yeah, like right around like 2020 was when all that was going down. And I think around that time we were thought, well, these are definitely not canon
Mm-hmm.
around that time. But now we've like shifted back, which I'm glad. I'm glad that they've recognized it as canon, and they've kind of in a way they've kind of like brought them quote unquote home in a way, even though I guess they were always home.
I think my sense, I think this was written in the MCU, the Reign of Marvel Studios book that we all read. Um, is that like, Marvel made all this content and everything, but it was exclusively um distributed through Netflix. I mean, like these characters, they didn't even show up in like the Endgame portals, in the portal scene, and I think that now with all this Marvel content being released on Disney Plus, I think Marvel has a better sense and control of what they're going to do with their projects, like a better like just vision. They've already had like the Young Avengers set up, and now with this, I think that they want to bring back all these like beloved Netflix Marvel characters and just be like, oh, like that's all been part of like the MCU, or and reintroduce them and make them part of like the MCU storyline. But I think that's like just a cheap way of saying like they've. Been there,
Yeah.
it's just never been outspoken. Because even like very recently, Kevin Feige has said like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies and like the X-Men Fox films, that's all MCU canon now that
Mm-hmm.
because of the multiverse and everything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
everything's canon in Marvel,
Yeah.
in Marvel's eyes.
Yeah.
Howard the Duck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a cool perspective you bring up, Porfirio, because Netflix is Netflix, right? Netflix is a competitor. So like business wise, I guess it kind of made sense to sort of distance the two things, right? But now that, you know, all these Netflix shows and characters are part of Disney Plus now, they can say, "Oh yeah, they've been here with us all along," right? You can say that. Um, but also kind of like what you're saying, Christian, those shows are really beloved, right? And it always baffled me back then. Like I loved the movies of the MCU, but I also really loved these Marvel Netflix shows, yeah. Um, and it was kind of frustrating not to get any kind of acknowledgement. Like, are these connected? How are they connected? Like, you tell me, right? And you just never got it. And like, I remember the day I went to see Avengers Endgame for the first time. I was like halfway expecting to see a Daredevil cameo.
Oh yeah, me too.
I wanted that like link. I wanted something, right? Like the closest thing we
Mhm.
got was like an appearance by Jarvis from like the what series was he
Agent,
in? Agent Carter.
Agent Carter. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And that was like, okay, we gave you your little Marvel TV thing. Done, right? But yeah, I was like, where's Daredevil? I want to see the Defenders among that, at the big battle at the end, like maybe in the background or something. Just nothing. Um, so like, why now? Why now? So like we talked about the business part of it. But there's also like, I think it's a little strategic too, right? Let's be honest, Marvel is struggling a bit now. We've talked about the failures of Ant-Man 3 and the box office flop of the Marvels, etc. and they're probably just looking at like different ways to market, right? And yes, the Marvel Netflix shows are beloved. So now they're saying, "Oh, it's canon." Keep watching our shit because all that stuff you loved before, they're part of the family too, right? And there's gonna be more stuff like this. We got Echo, and there's a Daredevil season coming too. So a little bit is like, come on, like now you're saying that. It's like now that you're desperate, you're saying this, right? What the hell? But in a way, it is kind of cool that they acknowledge that. But time will tell, like how much it's all gonna be part of it, right? And we know the Daredevil season's coming, but that's really about it, like um yeah, to what extent are those shows still going to be oh yeah, still going to be part of the MCU? Time will tell. Yeah.
Do you know, like, I forgot who told me this, but going back to that scene between Daredevil and Echo, um, that like, I guess, like, to make it like more like MCU connected and canon, that there was like a line that Daredevil says, that where he says something like, "Oh, like, I've been um tracking these guys for a while," or whatever. And like we said, that was like Echo's first fight. But then, like, again, I can't remember the details off the top of my head, but apparently, like, something Daredevil says kind of gives the indication that him and Kingpin survived the blip,
Hmm.
like that he never stopped fighting the crime in those like 5 years. And Kingpin also, how he kept like his like organization going. um but again, like, that's all like connecting like everything all together, like, oh, this is canon.
Interesting. I didn't catch that. I did not catch
Yeah,
that.
huh, that's a cool little tidbit.
Yeah.
Yeah, because um, Hawkeye survived the blip and became Ronin
Mhm.
during that time,
Right.
and that's probably that seems to be how he knew about Kingpin. I'm guessing from his show was from
Yeah.
his time as Ronin.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get into our ratings. How would you rate Echo on a scale of 1 out of 5, or 1 to 5? Um, yeah. Christian, you want to start us off here?
Okay, yeah. Let's see. I think overall I'm pretty mixed on this show. Um, like I said, I really liked episode one. I think this is a really good step for Marvel as a whole, this Marvel Spotlight, trying new things, new characters. I like the representation of it. It did really feel like they were dipping their toe into something new. Um, but unfortunately, at the end, I didn't really feel like it paid off as well as it should have. I think the powers, like we mentioned with the powers being really weird, and like I think the characters felt a bit underdeveloped. It seems like Disney just has not figured out the format of what they're going for. Like these feel too long to be movies, and they're a little too overstuffed to be movies, but they're still too short to be full on shows. They're in this kind of awkward middle ground here. Um, but I think, but I think a lot of the things kind of around that were actually kind of we're solid. Um, but yeah, I think the ones I'm teetering kind of are between. I'm kind of feeling in between a 2 and a 3. here with like whereas the first episode I would say is like, yeah, it's like, oh man, that was so cool, got me so pumped, 5 out of 5. But for the final episode was just shaking my head, like what happened, and um, with some of the middle parts, kind of there were some highlights here and there, and I liked some of the characters, but I did feel like they were kind of underdeveloped, and the show just kind of lost me as it went on. So I guess unfortunately, I might be leaning towards a 2. But I think with that, I did really like the character. I do want to see her come back as well. And I do want to see more of this type of project, you know. I do want to see more of the Marvel spotlight and more of Echo.
Got it. Got it. Okay, I can go next. So yeah, I'm with you on a lot of that, Christian. Yeah, I was thinking a lot of the season I felt was good, but never great. I mean, arguably that Daredevil battle scene was great, but other than that, like nothing was really great. Like overall the action in the show was good, but not great. And there was, some comedy that was decent, but not great. And a lot of the show had not a lot. Some of the show had like some, emotional punch to it. I think the very end was pretty emotional where Echo finally reconciles with her family, right? And they have a nice happy family get together moment. Um so that was nice. That definitely held some emotional weight, had a bit of an emotional punch to it. But again, it's like I was feeling it, but it wasn't great. Um, and like even like the grittiness, right? The violence is cool. But it wasn't like they didn't go full on, right? Like some of the stuff you see in like the Netflix Daredevil series and certainly the Netflix Punisher series, um, that stuff's a lot more violent. So they upped the ante with the violence, and props to Marvel Studios for doing it on Disney Plus of all places. But again, like it was just like, yeah, it's good, but it wasn't great. And yeah, that's kind of my sense all throughout. Um, that all said, there are a lot of reasons to watch this show. And it goes back to a lot of stuff I mentioned, how it's just like this show is really, it was made against all odds, and the fact that it exists is amazing in itself, right? It's so cool that you get to see a disabled Native American superhero like headlining her own show. Um, yeah, it's so kind of mind blowing to me. And it was definitely flawed, but you get a lot of what you want to see. Again, like, could it have been done better? Yes. Um, but it was kind of like good enough, I would say, for me to recommend. So I'll give it a 3 out of 5. How about you, Porfirio?
I really like this show, like I there's a lot of good elements that I enjoyed, like the representation, the acting, I thought the storyline was pretty decent. The dark tone really reminded me of the Netflix Marvel days. Um, I do agree with both you guys prior. Like the ending was a little like funky and a little out there with the superpowers and the whole not killing Kingpin, letting him live. um, Hopefully that gets addressed in future MCU films. But overall, I really enjoyed it. It was really different than what we've seen in past Disney Plus material.
Yeah.
Um, and I just feel like the storyline was pretty good. It wasn't like weird, too weird, like make believe stuff that didn't go anywhere. So I would give this a 4 out of 5. I did not expect to enjoy it as much as I did, and I think because of that, I really hecka enjoyed it. And this one I like highly recommend folks checking out. And it's something that I feel like you really don't need to watch like Hawkeye or any other Disney or Marvel project to understand what's going on. I feel like it's a good standalone piece, and it's just really kind of really worth checking out.
Hey, that's a good point. The show really does stand alone pretty well. Like, well, I mean, the beginning does sort of draw from other things like Hawkeye and other stuff, but um the the end is really like an ending, right? It's an end of the story, and there's no real like cliffhanger going on, right? I mean, you could argue that mid-credit scene is sort of like a teaser for Daredevil, but the show itself really is pretty standalone for the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so like we often do, how about a comics recommendation, Porfirio? What do you got?
So, I spoke on this earlier, but Echo, she's only, I think, had one solo series, and this one called Phoenix Song Echo, where Echo, she is the host of the Phoenix. Um, Pretty awesome. So in Avengers series, the Phoenix is looking for a host, and she kind of has like this like Mortal Kombat style to see who's like worthy of becoming the host. And Echo does not win that tournament. She actually loses in like the quarterfinals or something like that
Mm.
to Neymar. And um even despite her loss, the Phoenix chooses her to become the host because I guess of like her like spirit um and desire to do good. And so the series kind of follows like Echo's like question of like, okay, like the Phoenix chose me, why? So there's like this like internal conflict, while the external conflict is like this villain who is trying to harness the Phoenix power from Echo. And so Echo goes back in time and meets a bunch of her ancestors, and you find out that one of her ancestors, like back in time, actually did harness the Phoenix. So she's not the first in her family lineage to harness the power. And so Echo just kind of like, because we've seen and like the Phoenix is just everywhere the Phoenix goes, she brings a bunch of destruction, and Echo's no stranger to that. And like some other uh Marvel characters like Elektra and an X-Men named Forge recognize the dangers that the Phoenix draws. So they warn Echo, but she is like, oh, like I'm gonna be different or whatever. So it's a cool story to check out if you just want to learn a little bit more about her and just see like some cool Native American representation.
Right on. Excellent recommendation, Porfirio. And yeah, we've been voicing our displeasure about Echo having superpowers in this show. But guess what? It's comics canon that Echo has superpowers, right? So you can
Yeah,
always point to the source material and go, hey, they did it in the comics, right? So there is that.
and it's weird. Like she doesn't. I forget who, but she doesn't call like Phoenix the Phoenix. She actually calls it like Firebird. You know, I,
Interesting.
I feel like that's a little bit more of like a like maybe like Native American like spiritualism. You know, with
Yeah.
connecting like that, and so I think that's just a cool way of like reimagining like the Phoenix tale and just giving it to Echo, like who's Native American, just being like, well, like, like in Native American like culture, that's just something that's more intertwined, like Native Americans and spiritualism with animals. So it makes sense, but I think that's a cool reimagination and use of the Phoenix power.
Right on. And with that, we can wrap up the episode. This is farewell from Henry, Porfirio, and Christian.